Rose Carter woke up in her one-bedroom apartment in Northeast Portland to the sound of rain drumming on the windows. October 2024 had been particularly rainy, even by Oregon standards. At 6:30 a.m., she was already standing in front of the mirror, braiding her long brown hair into a practical ponytail. Her job at Fresh Market Supermarket required her to be there by 8, and tardiness was not tolerated. 24-year-old Rose had been living in Portland for 3 years, having moved here from a small town in the eastern part of the state after her mother's death. Her father had left the family when she was only 12, and since then, she had grown accustomed to relying only on herself. The $1,200 a month apartment ate up most of her cashier's salary, but that was the price of independence in the big city. On the bus to work, Rose leafed through her graphic design textbook. Evening classes at Portland Community College were her hope for a better future, although progress was slow. Between work, school, and relationships, time was desperately short. Fresh Market on Burnside Street was a typical city supermarket with high ceilings, bright lighting, and a constant stream of customers. Rose worked at the third register, the one closest to the entrance. Over the course of 3 years, she had learned the habits of the regular customers. Mr. Chen bought the same products every Tuesday. Mrs. Rodriguez always forgot her coupons at home and got upset, and students from the nearby university came for energy drinks at the most inconvenient hours. The manager, Steve, a man in his 40s with a receding hairline and a perpetually dissatisfied expression, treated his employees like expendable commodities. "Carter, register number 3 and hurry up. We already have a line all the way to the dairy section," he said without even looking up from his tablet. Rose silently took her place. Mechanical movements, scanning items, announcing prices, accepting payment, giving change. "Have a nice day," she said to each customer with a professional smile, even though her thoughts were far away. During her lunch break, she was approached by Megan O'Connor, her best friend, and the only person in Portland whom Rose could call a true confidant. Megan worked as a hairdresser at a trendy salon in the Pearl District and always looked like she had stepped off the cover of a magazine. Perfect hair, flawless makeup, stylish clothes. "You look tired," Megan said, sitting down across from her in the small break room. "Studying all night again?" "Not just that," Rose replied, avoiding her gaze. "I have a design project due next week, plus Jacob wants us to spend more time together." Jacob Miller had come into Rose's life 8 months ago. They met at a coffee shop on Hawthorne Street when he accidentally spilled his cappuccino on her. The 26-year-old delivery driver was the complete opposite of the men Rose had dated before. Reliable, punctual, predictable. He was never late for a date, always remembered important dates, and made plans for the future with the methodical precision of an accountant. "Jacob's a good guy," Megan said, but there was a hint of doubt in her voice. "But you do understand that life isn't just about stability, right? Sometimes you need emotion, passion." Rose felt her cheeks flush. Megan always knew how to read between the lines, but some things were better kept secret, even from your best friends. That evening, Rose met Jacob at their favorite restaurant, Portland Grill, near the Willamette River. Jacob ordered his usual, a medium-rare steak with potatoes, and she had a chicken salad. Predictable, just like their relationship. "Rose, I wanted to talk to you," Jacob began, nervously adjusting his shirt collar. "We've been dating for 8 months now, and I think it's time to take the next step." Rose's heart beat faster. She knew where he was going with this, and the conversation scared her more than it should have. "I want us to move in together," Jacob continued. "I know your apartment is small, but I have a 2-bedroom in Hawthorne, and there's plenty of room for 2. We could save on rent and spend more time together." "Jake, Rose put down her fork, trying to find the right words. "This is a big step. I need time to think." Disappointment flashed in his eyes, but he quickly hid it behind an understanding smile. "Of course, baby. I'm not rushing you. I just want you to know that I'm serious about us." On her way home, Rose walked through the city center, past brightly lit shop windows and street musicians. Portland never slept completely, especially in areas where nightlife was bustling. Neon signs from bars and clubs reflected in puddles on the wet asphalt, creating a kaleidoscope of colors. She had 3 unread messages on her phone. The first was from Jacob. "Thanks for tonight. Love you." The second was from her design professor about a lecture rescheduling. The third made her stop in the middle of the street. "Thinking of you. Can't sleep? R." Rose quickly deleted the message and hid her phone in her jacket pocket. A passerby hurrying by under an umbrella gave her a disapproving look for blocking the sidewalk. She apologized and hurried on, but her thoughts no longer returned to Jacob and his proposal. Back at her apartment, Rose made some tea and sat by the window, watching the lights of the city at night. Portland was full of possibilities and temptations, and sometimes she felt lost in this sea of choices. The simplicity of life with Jacob seemed like a lifeline, but something inside her resisted this security. On the bedside table lay a notebook with her sketches, logos, posters, designs she had created in her spare time. Her teachers said she had talent, but talent wasn't enough in a city where every third person considered themselves an artist or designer. Rose opened the notebook to a random page. There was a sketch of a man's profile, drawn with careless but confident lines. A strong jaw, wavy hair, eyes that seemed piercing even in a drawing. She quickly turned the page. Her phone beeped again with a notification. This time, Rose didn't even bother to check who the message was from. Instead, she turned off the sound and placed the device face down on the table. Tomorrow was a normal workday, an 8-hour shift at the supermarket, then a typography lecture at college, then home to textbooks and projects. Life in the big city demanded constant forward motion, but sometimes Rose felt like she was running in circles. As she fell asleep to the sounds of Portland at night, distant sirens, the noise of passing cars, voices of people on the street, she had no idea that in a few weeks her name would be in all the city's crime reports, and detectives would be trying to unravel the mysteries of her life that she had so carefully hidden. That night, she had a dream about 2 roads diverging in a dense forest. In her dream, she couldn't decide which one to take and stood at the fork in the road in the rain, which was getting heavier and heavier. 3 months ago, Rose saw Ryan Blackwell for the first time at the Cider House Bar in the Alberta neighborhood. Megan dragged her there after a particularly difficult day at the salon when a client made a scene over the wrong shade of blonde. "You need to relax," Megan insisted, ordering a second cocktail. "You're too focused on school and work. When was the last time you did something spontaneous?" Rose was about to reply that spontaneity was a luxury she couldn't afford when she noticed a man at the bar. He stood slightly apart from a noisy group of construction workers, sipping beer and watching the crowd. Tall, broad-shouldered, with working hands and a confident gait. When their eyes met, time seemed to stand still. "Don't stare so obviously," Megan whispered, nudging her with her elbow. "But yes, he's cute, and judging by his clothes, he works with his hands. An interesting change from our neat and tidy Jacob." Ryan approached their table without ceremony. "May I join you?" he asked, his voice tinged with a confidence that Jacob so sorely lacked. The conversation flowed easily. Ryan said he was a foreman on the construction of a new residential complex in South Portland. He had moved here 2 years ago from Denver after his divorce, looking for a fresh start. He didn't say much, but every word hit the mark. He had a special ability to listen that made Rose tell him more about herself than she should have told a stranger. "Design," he said when she mentioned her studies. "So you create something beautiful out of chaos. I understand that feeling." Unlike Jacob, who always planned their dates in advance and warned her of every step, Ryan lived in the moment. When he suggested taking a walk along the waterfront instead of waiting for the evening at the bar to end, Rose agreed without thinking about the consequences. The Willamette River walk at night was like another world. The lights of the bridges reflected in the dark water, and the air was filled with the smell of the river and distant rain clouds. They walked in silence, and Rose could feel the electricity emanating from this stranger. "You're not like the other girls here," he said suddenly. "There's something real about you." "Do you know a lot of girls in Portland?" she asked with a hint of irony. "Enough to know the difference." That evening changed everything. Ryan didn't ask for her phone number. He just said, "I'll be at the cider house on Friday at 9. If you want to see me." The following week, Rose was torn between desire and reason. Jacob planned their weekend with his usual meticulousness. Breakfast at a new pancake place, a trip to the Portland Art Museum, dinner at his parents' house in the suburbs. Everything was right, logical, safe. But on Friday at 9 o'clock, she was standing at the entrance to Cider House. Ryan was waiting for her at the same table, as if he was sure she would come. "I knew you'd come," he said simply. "How could you be so sure?" "Because you're tired of predictability. It's written all over your face." From that moment on, she began living a double life. During the day, Rose was a model girl. She worked, studied, met Jacob in respectable places, and discussed plans for the future. In the evenings, when the opportunity arose, she became someone else, the one who met Ryan in the bars of the Alberta district, walked with him through the deserted industrial streets, listened to stories about his past and construction projects. Ryan was an enigma. He never talked about his family and rarely mentioned his friends. Work was not just a means of earning a living for him. He spoke of construction as creating something permanent in a world of constant change. "When I hammer in the first nail," he said once, "I know that in a year's time, there will be a house here where people will spend the best years of their lives." But there was a dark side. Ryan would go hours without responding to messages, then show up suddenly, as if he had a right to her time. He asked questions about Jacob with undisguised jealousy, even though he insisted that their relationship should remain secret. "Why don't you tell him?" he asked during one of their nighttime walks through East Portland. "Because it's not that simple," Rose replied. "Jacob and I have plans, a future. And what do you have with me?" She didn't know how to answer. With Ryan, she had what she lacked with Jacob: unpredictability, passion, the feeling of living on the edge. But was that enough for a serious relationship? Jacob, meanwhile, was planning their future with his characteristic methodicalness. He showed her apartments in the best neighborhoods, told her about his promotion at work, hinted at an engagement. His parents, a respectable couple from the suburb of Beaverton, already considered Rose part of the family. "Mom asked if you'd like to help with Christmas dinner," Jacob said during one of their weekly dinners. "She thinks you'll fit in perfectly with our traditions." Traditions, stability, predictability. Everything Rose had dreamed of as a teenager in a small town, looking at pictures of happy families in magazines. But why did it now feel like a cage? Megan noticed the changes in her friend's behavior, even though Rose tried to hide them. "You've been kind of distracted," she said, during their weekly lunch at a Thai restaurant on Division Street. "And don't tell me it's because of school. I know you too well." "I've just got a lot on my plate," Rose evaded. "Rose, we've been friends for 3 years. You can trust me." But how could she explain something she didn't understand herself? How could she tell her that she was seeing 2 men at the same time and didn't know what she wanted out of life? Ryan worked on a construction site in an industrial area where the skeletons of future residential towers rose between warehouses and factories. Rose sometimes stopped by during her lunch break if her manager let her leave early. She watched him lead the crew, saw how the other workers respected his opinion and experience. "You're creating the future," she said once, looking at the growing building. "And you're creating beauty," he replied. "That's more important." Unlike Jacob, who always tried to impress, Ryan showed her Portland as the real residents saw it. Hidden bars in basements, street art in alleys, places where people who didn't want to be found gathered. But gradually, Rose began to notice warning signs. Ryan was unpredictable, and not just in a good way. He would disappear for days without explanation, then reappear with flowers and excuses that sounded plausible but raised questions. "Where have you been?" she asked after one such disappearance. "Work," he replied curtly. "Sometimes I have to travel to sites outside the city." But when she casually asked Ryan's colleague, whom she met at the grocery store, about it, he was surprised. "Ryan? He worked here every day last week." Rose didn't try to find out the truth. Part of her didn't want to know the answers to some questions. The psychological tension grew with each passing day. In the morning, she woke up thinking about Ryan. During the day, she tried to focus on work and study, and in the evening, she spent time with Jacob, pretending to be a happy girl. At night, when Jacob drove her home and wished her good night, she would sometimes leave the apartment again to meet Ryan at their secret places. Detective Sarah Thompson didn't even know Rose Carter existed at the time. An experienced investigator with 15 years on the Portland Police Department, she was working on a series of burglaries in the eastern part of the city. Tall, with short graying hair and a piercing gaze, Sarah could read people like an open book. Her colleagues respected her for her professionalism and intuition, which helped her solve the most difficult cases. "Every crime leaves a trace," she liked to tell the younger detectives. "You just have to know where to look." Megan O'Connor sensed that her friend was hiding something, but she didn't press her for answers. At the Elegant Style Salon in the Pearl District, she worked with wealthy clients who paid $300 for a haircut and considered their hairdresser their therapist. Megan had learned to listen to other people's secrets and keep them, but Rose's secret bothered her more than any other. "Love should bring happiness, not stress," she said, giving Rose a manicure on one of her rare free evenings. "You've become nervous and distracted, that's not like you." "It's just a transition period," Rose replied, watching Megan carefully apply the nail polish. "Jacob wants a serious relationship, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "What's stopping you? He's the perfect guy. Hard-working, loyal, planning for the future." "Maybe that's the problem," Rose admitted. "It's all too perfect, too safe." Megan looked up from her hand. "Is safety a bad thing?" "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like life is passing me by while I'm playing the good girl." Ryan came into her life as the antithesis of everything proper and safe. He rented a small apartment in an old building in the southeast, in a neighborhood that was just beginning to gentrify. The walls were decorated with photos of construction projects and maps of the city. No family photos, no hints of the past. "Tell me about yourself," Rose asked during one of their meetings. "What is there to tell?" he replied, hugging her. "The past is a burden. Only what is happening now is important." But Rose wanted to know more. Where did the scar on his left shoulder come from? Why did he have no friends other than his co-workers? Why did he never mention his family? When she asked direct questions, Ryan skillfully changed the subject or distracted her with kisses. Gradually, Rose realized that his secrets were part of his appeal and at the same time, a source of her anxiety. "You think about him when we're together," Jacob said one evening as they watched a movie at his apartment. Rose flinched. "Who?" "I don't know. Someone. You've been distant. Can we talk about it?" Honesty was one of Jacob's best qualities, but right now Rose wished he were less observant. "Just tired, work, school, it's all piling up. Maybe you should take a vacation. We could go to the ocean for the weekend. Remember you said you wanted to see whales?" Yes, she remembered. That was a month ago, when their relationship seemed simple and straightforward. Before Ryan came into her life with his mysteries and inexplicable attraction. Late in the evening, after Jacob had driven her home and wished her good night, Rose received a message. "Can't sleep? Meet me at the Hawthorne Bridge in half an hour." Archie knew she should stay home, go to bed, forget about these dangerous games. Instead, she put on her jacket and went out into the rainy Portland night. Hawthorne Bridge was almost empty at midnight. Only a few cars passed by, leaving behind the glare of their headlights on the wet asphalt. Ryan stood at the railing, looking at the city lights reflected in the water. "I shouldn't be here," Rose said, approaching him. "But you are," he replied, turning around. There was something new in his eyes, something intense and slightly frightening. "That means something." "What exactly?" "That you're tired of living someone else's life." He was right, and that scared her the most. With Ryan, she felt alive, real, but those feelings came at a price she wasn't ready to pay yet. Returning home late at night, Rose thought about how long this double life could continue. Sooner or later, she would have to make a choice. And with each meeting with Ryan, that choice became more and more difficult. The decision came on a normal Thursday morning when Rose stood in front of the bathroom mirror and saw a woman she didn't recognize. Dark circles under her eyes, nervous, trembling hands, the look of someone who had lived a lie for too long. Last night, Jacob had brought up the engagement again, and during the night, Ryan had sent a message with a single word: "I miss you." "Enough," she whispered to her reflection. "This has to end." The day dragged on painfully slowly at the supermarket. Every customer seemed irritated by the October weather and Monday mood. Rose scanned the items mechanically, but her thoughts were preoccupied with the upcoming conversation with Ryan. During her lunch break, she texted him, "We need to talk. Tonight at 8 at the 3-story bridge." The reply came almost instantly. "Did something happen? Just come." Rose spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous tension. Her colleagues noticed her distraction but chalked it up to normal fatigue. Only Steve, the manager, made a comment. "Carter, if personal problems are interfering with your work, deal with them in your own time." The meeting with Jacob after work was particularly painful. He bought her favorite orchids and talked about his plans for the weekend with the enthusiasm of a child before Christmas. "Mom wants to show you some family photos," he said over dinner at Italian Cuisine on 23rd Avenue. "She has albums from my childhood. I warn you, I was a funny little fat kid." Rose smiled and nodded in the right places, but every word about the future hurt. How can you plan a life with someone when your heart is torn between two men? At 7:30, she told Jacob she was tired and wanted to go home. He walked her to the door of her apartment, kissed her goodbye, and promised to call tomorrow. Rose waited until the sound of his footsteps disappeared down the hallway before stepping back out onto the street. A 3-story bridge connected the east and west banks of the Willamette in a less touristy part of town. It was quieter here than downtown, with few pedestrians in the evening. The perfect place for difficult conversations. Ryan was already waiting by the railing, smoking a cigarette and looking at the water. When he saw her, he smiled that same smile that had made her forget all reasonable arguments 3 months ago. "You came," he said, throwing his cigarette into the water. "I was starting to get worried." "Ryan, we need to have a serious talk." Something in her tone made his expression change. The smile disappeared, and wariness appeared in his eyes. "I'm listening." Rose took a deep breath. "This has to stop. Our meetings. I can't live like this anymore." He was silent for a minute, digesting what she had said. "Because of him?" he finally asked. "Because of me. I'm tired of lying. Tired of cheating. It's wrong." "Wrong?" Ryan took a step closer, and Rose felt the tension emanating from him. "And what you feel with me is wrong? The way you look at me, the way you breathe when we're together?" "It doesn't matter," she replied, taking a step back. "I have commitments to Jacob. We're planning a future." "A future?" Ryan laughed, but there was no joy in his laughter. "With that boring postman, you'll bury yourself in his predictable life." "It's my choice." "No, it's fear. You're afraid of real feelings, real life." The conversation became increasingly tense. Ryan talked about how they were made for each other, how their connection was special. Rose tried to explain that she couldn't continue living a double life, that she needed honesty and stability. "I thought you would understand," she said finally. "We're adults. Sometimes relationships just end." Ours won't, Ryan replied with such confidence that Rose felt a chill run down her spine. They parted in tense silence. Rose walked home quickly, feeling his gaze on her back, although when she turned around, she saw no one. The next day, Ryan sent 23 messages. The first ones were romantic, full of memories of their encounters. Gradually, the tone changed to pleading, then angry. "You can't just disappear from my life. We're not done talking. Answer me. You're making a mistake." Rose deleted all the messages without reading them and blocked his number, but Ryan found other ways to contact her. Bouquets of flowers with no sender's name appeared at work. Steve grumbled that the store was no place for romance, but Rose knew it wasn't from Jacob. He had a different style, always with a card, always appropriate. In the evening, as she was leaving the supermarket, she noticed a familiar silhouette at the bus stop across the street. Ryan was leaning against a lamppost, staring intently at the store exit. When their eyes met, he didn't look away or try to hide. Rose quickly went back into the store and asked security guard Mike to walk her to the bus stop. "Problems with your ex?" the elderly man asked, and she nodded, not trusting her voice. When they came out, Ryan was gone. The next day, the situation repeated itself, and the next. Ryan didn't approach her or try to talk to her, but his presence was constantly felt. At the bus stop, near the college after lectures, even near Jacob's house when they were returning from dinner. "Someone's following us," Jacob said one evening, looking over his shoulder. "You're imagining things," Rose replied, even though her heart was pounding like crazy. Megan was the first to notice the change in her friend's behavior. "You look scared," she said during their meeting at the Blue Star Cafe on Hawthorne Street. "What's going on?" "Nothing much. Rose, I've known you since college. You're not the type to be scared for no reason." Rose almost told the truth. The words were on the tip of her tongue, ready to spill out. But how could she explain that she had gotten herself into a situation that was spiraling out of control? "It's just stress from school," she lied. "My project defense is coming up soon." On the fourth day of the stalking, Rose decided to take action. She knew that Ryan worked at a construction site in an industrial area, so she went there during her lunch break. The construction site was a chaotic mess of concrete, rebar, and construction equipment. Workers in hard hats moved between the floors of the unfinished building like ants in a destroyed anthill. "Ryan Blackwell?" the foreman asked when Rose inquired about him. "Strange, you're the second one this week." "The second?" "Yes, a woman came by the day before yesterday. She was also looking for Ryan. She said she was from an insurance company, but she didn't show any documents." Rose felt a chill in her chest. "Where is he now?" "He's on vacation for a week. He said it was family business." On the way home, Rose tried to figure out who else might be looking for Ryan. He said he had no close friends or family in Portland, that he had started his life here with a clean slate. Another mystery to add to the collection of secrets surrounding this man. That evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. "Did you think you could just disappear?" Ryan's voice sounded different, hoarse, angry. "How did you get my number? I blocked it. I have my ways. We need to meet." "Number, I said everything I needed to say on the bridge." "Rose, you don't understand. We can't just walk away from each other. There's too much between us." "There's nothing between us," she shouted into the phone, and immediately regretted her harshness. A long pause. Then his voice, now icy. "We'll see." After that call, the stalking intensified. Ryan no longer hid. He openly appeared in places where Rose went, sometimes on the same bus, sometimes at the cafe where she had breakfast before work. Always at a distance, always silent, but his presence weighed on her like a physical burden. At college, her professor noticed her distraction. "Miss Carter, your corporate design project was due a week ago." "I'm sorry, Professor Davis. I had personal circumstances." "Personal circumstances do not excuse professional irresponsibility. You have 3 more days." Rose nodded, but she knew it was impossible to focus on her studies right now. Every rustle behind her made her turn around, Every shadow in the alley could be Ryan. A surprise awaited her as she left college. Ryan was standing at the main entrance, leaning against the metal railing. Students walked by, ignoring the tall man in the work jacket, but to Rose, he seemed threateningly conspicuous. "We need to talk," he said as she tried to walk past him. "I have nothing to say to you." "I have a lot to say to you." There was barely contained aggression in his voice. Several students turned around, sensing the tension. "Not here," Rose whispered. "It's crowded." "Then where? You don't answer your calls or read your messages. I have to come find you myself." They moved to a small square near the campus. The rain was getting heavier, and the few passers-by hurried to take shelter under the roofs. "Ryan, listen to me carefully," Rose began, trying to remain calm. "What we had is over. I've made a decision." "Without me? How can you make decisions about our relationship without me?" "Because it's my life." "And I'm not part of your life? Did these 3 months mean nothing?" An expression appeared in his eyes that Rose had never seen before, a mixture of despair and rage. She instinctively took a step back. "Of course they did, but that doesn't mean we have to be together." "They did," he repeated with a bitter smile. "The past. You've already buried us." "Ryan, I don't want to hurt you." "It's too late for that." He turned and walked away, but stopped after a few steps. "You think you know me, Rose, but you're wrong. You don't know what I'm capable of." There was something in his words that made her blood run cold. This was no longer a romantic drama or the usual jealousy of a rejected lover. It was something darker. Over the next few days, the situation only got worse. Ryan was no longer content to watch from a distance. He began to appear in the most unexpected places, at the grocery store where Rose worked, at the cafe near her home, even near Megan's salon. "He was here yesterday," Megan said on the phone. "He sat in the cafe across the street and just stared at our salon. An hour, maybe 2. The staff started to get nervous." "What did he want?" "He asked about you. When you come in, when you leave, who you talk to." Rose felt fear tighten her throat. "And what did you say?" "That I don't discuss my clients' personal lives." "But Rose," he looked strange. "What's going on between you two?" The moment of truth had arrived. "Megan, I was seeing him. For 3 months. Secretly, from Jacob." A long pause. "Oh my God, Rose. What now?" "I broke up with him, but he can't accept it. This isn't just an ex-boyfriend who can't let go. This is stalking." Megan was right. What started as an attempt to win back a lost love was turning into something more sinister. At work, Rose asked her manager to change her schedule, but Steve refused. "We're short-staffed, Carter. We can't rearrange the schedule because of your personal problems." She started taking different routes to and from work, but Ryan always found her. Sometimes, she would see his reflection in a shop window. Sometimes, she would notice a familiar silhouette in the crowd on the opposite side of the street. Jacob noticed her nervousness. "Something's going on with you," he said during their Saturday dinner. "You're constantly looking over your shoulder, flinching at every sound." "I'm just tired." "Rose, we can trust each other. If there's a problem, I want to help." His sincerity hurt. Jacob offered help and support, unaware that the problem was her own deception. "Everything's fine, really." But everything was far from fine. On Sunday evening, as Rose was walking home from Jacob's place, she heard footsteps behind her. Steady, measured, matching the rhythm of her own steps. She quickened her pace. The footsteps quickened. She stopped to look at a shop window. The footsteps stopped. She turned around and saw no one, but the feeling of someone's presence remained. On Monday morning, there was an envelope with no return address at her apartment door. Inside was a photo of her and Ryan taken during one of their walks along the waterfront. On the back, someone had written, "You can't erase the past." Rose struggled to get to work. Her hands were shaking so badly that she dropped a can of food twice while scanning it. Regular customers began to ask questions, noticing her condition. "Honey, are you all right?" asked Mrs. Rodriguez as she bought her usual groceries. "You're as pale as a ghost." "I just didn't get enough sleep." But the problem wasn't sleep. The problem was the feeling that her life was spiraling out of control, that her decision to break up with Ryan had only made things worse. That evening, Jacob brought up their future together again, but this time he was more specific. "I've been looking at apartments in Nob Hill," he said over dinner. "There's a great 2-bedroom with a view of the city." "Jake, please, not now." "When then?" "Rose, we've been together for almost a year. I love you. I want to build a life with you." His words were honest and sincere, but now they sounded like a sentence. How could she build a life on a foundation of lies? Late that night, already home, Rose received a final message from Ryan. "Meet me tomorrow at Forest Park. Midnight. Come alone. I have something to show you." Forest Park at midnight on October 15th, 2024, was plunged into pitch darkness. Rain had turned the paths into slippery mud, and the wind rocked the branches of old fir trees, creating an ominous symphony of creaks and rustles. Rose Carter walked along the main path, lighting her way with her phone's flashlight, each step a struggle. She shouldn't have come. All evening she had convinced herself to stay home, to ignore the message, but something in Ryan's tone made her believe that if she didn't come now, the consequences would be even worse. "I'm here," she whispered into the void, stopping at an old wooden picnic shelter. A shadow emerged from behind the trees. "I knew you'd come." The voice was familiar, but the tone was new, cold, full of barely contained anger. "What did you want to talk about?" Rose asked, trying not to show her fear. "About us, about what you're trying to destroy." "Ryan, there's nothing between us anymore. I explained that." "Explained?" He stepped closer, and in the light of the flashlight, his face became visible, distorted with rage and pain. "You think you can use people and then throw them away like trash?" "I didn't use anyone." "Liar!" he shouted so sharply that Rose recoiled. "You played with me for 3 months while you made plans with that nobody." The last thing Rose Carter saw was the look of utter rage in the eyes of the man she once thought was her salvation from a boring life. Randall Cowan was walking his dog Max at 7 a.m. on October 16th, as he had done every day for the past 5 years. The elderly retiree lived in a house on the edge of a forest park and considered morning walks the best way to start the day. Max, a medium-sized mutt, loved to explore the trails and often ran off into the bushes in pursuit of interesting smells. "Max, come back!" Randall shouted as the dog ran toward a picnic shelter. The dog barked excitedly, circling around something on the ground. As he approached, Randall saw something that made his heart stop. The body of a young woman lay in an unnatural position under the shelter. Her brown hair was tousled, her clothes were torn, and there were dark marks on her neck. With trembling hands, Randall took out his phone and dialed 911. "Emergency services, how can I help you?" "I found a body in Forest Park, by the old shelter. A young woman. I think she's dead." Detective Sarah Thompson received the call at 7:45 a.m. as she was finishing her second cup of coffee in her apartment in the Hawthorne neighborhood. 15 years with the Portland Police Bureau had taught her to recognize special cases by the dispatcher's voice. This was one of those calls. "Possible homicide, Forest Park. First responders are on scene, awaiting detectives." Sarah grabbed her badge, gun, and jacket. 20 minutes later, she was at the Forest Park, where the usual hustle and bustle of an investigation was already underway. Yellow tape cordoned off the crime scene, uniformed officers were questioning witnesses, and technicians were preparing equipment to collect evidence. "What do we have?" she asked Sergeant Mills, her regular partner. Rose Carter, 24 years old, found by a dog walker around 7 in the morning. Preliminary cause of death is strangulation, but the coroner will determine the exact cause. Sarah approached the body, putting on gloves. Rose was lying on her back, her arms spread out to the sides. Signs of a struggle on the ground around the body indicated that the victim had resisted. There were distinct fingerprints on her neck. Time of death? The coroner says between midnight and 2 in the morning. The body hadn't cooled completely when it was found. Sarah carefully examined the scene. There were no personal belongings of the victim except for a broken phone a few meters from the body. Her purse, keys, wallet, everything was gone. Robbery? Mills suggested. Possibly. But the killer didn't take the expensive earrings. And look at the position of the body. This wasn't a random robbery killing. Someone knew the victim. In Rose's jacket pocket, they found a wet note written in her handwriting. "Forgive me." The paper was soggy from the rain, but the words were still legible. "A suicide note?" Mills asked. "Or something else," Sarah replied, carefully packing the note into an evidence bag. By 10 a.m., the victim had been identified from a driver's license found by technicians in the grass. Rose Carter, address in Northeast Portland, no criminal record, employed at Fresh Market Supermarket. The detective's first visit was to her employer. Steve, the supermarket manager, looked shocked by the news. Rose, killed. But that's impossible. She worked until 6 yesterday as usual. "How has she been acting lately?" Sarah asked. "A little nervous, distracted, but I chalked it up to boyfriend problems. Young people always have drama." "What kind of boyfriend problems?" "No idea. I don't keep track of my staff's personal lives." The next stop was Rose's apartment. A search revealed the neatly organized life of a single person. Design textbooks, sketchbooks, a few clothes, minimal furniture. On the refrigerator was a photo of a young man, both smiling at the camera against the backdrop of the Portland skyline. "Boyfriend?" Mills suggested. Jacob Miller's address was found in Rose's notebook. The detectives drove to his home in the Hawthorne neighborhood. Jacob opened the door in his pajamas, his face sleepy. When Sarah introduced herself and told him about Rose's death, he turned pale and grabbed the doorframe. "No, that's impossible. I drove her home yesterday at 10 p.m. She was alive. We were planning to meet today." "Mr. Miller, we need to ask you a few questions. May we come in?" Jacob's apartment was the complete opposite of Rose's modest home. It was spacious, neat, with expensive furniture and appliances. There were photos of the couple on the shelf, and movie tickets and weekend plans hanging on the refrigerator. "How long had you been dating?" Sarah asked. 11 months. We were planning I was going to propose to her at Christmas. "Tell me about last night." Jacob described their dinner at the restaurant in detail, the trip to Rose's house, and their goodbye at the door. "I offered to walk her up, but she said she was tired. It was around 10. "And then?" "I drove home. I was here until morning." "Can anyone confirm that?" Jacob looked at the detectives, confused. "No, I lived alone. The neighbors might have heard the TV." "Did Rose have any enemies? Problems with anyone?" "No, everyone loved her. She was perfect." Jacob's voice trembled with emotion. "What about other men in her life?" "What men? We had been dating for almost a year. She wasn't interested in anyone else." Sarah noticed the sincerity in his voice, but experience had taught her not to trust first impressions. The most dangerous criminals often looked like model citizens. A ring was found in the house in a jewelry store box, a wedding ring with a small diamond. The receipt showed the date of purchase, 3 days ago. "An expensive ring for a courier," Mills remarked as they stepped outside. "And bought just after the victim started to pull away," Sarah added. "A classic situation. A guy feels he's losing his girlfriend and takes a desperate step." Neighbors confirmed that Jacob was indeed at home that evening. His car was in the parking lot and the lights were on in the windows. But the rear exit of the building was unguarded, and he could easily have left unnoticed. Technicians found tire tracks near the entrance to the forest park. The tread matched the tires on Jacob's car, a common 2018 Honda Civic model. "There are a lot of cars with those tires in the city," Mills cautioned. "But not all owners have a motive to kill Rose Carter," Sarah replied. A search of Jacob's car yielded unexpected results. Dirty shoes and a jacket were found in the trunk, which looked like they had been recently washed. Jacob explained that it was because of his job. He sometimes had to deliver packages to remote areas with poor roads. "Did you wash your clothes last night?" Sarah asked. "Yes, after dinner. I wanted to look my best for my meeting with Rose today." "At 10 o'clock at night? That's late to be doing laundry." "I'm used to doing my chores in the evening. I have more time after work." The story seemed logical, but too convenient. Experienced criminals often prepare explanations for suspicious details in advance. Technicians worked from morning to night in Rose's apartment. No signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle. But they found something interesting in the trash can. A scrap of a photograph. A piece of a man's face, not Jacob's. "She had another man," Mills said, examining the fragment through a magnifying glass. "Or just old photos," Sarah replied, but added the find to the list of evidence. Coroner David Chen arrived at the crime scene at 11 in the morning. An experienced medic, he had worked in the department for 12 years and knew how to extract information from silent witnesses. "Strangulation by hands," he confirmed the preliminary version. The victim resisted. There is foreign skin under her fingernails. Time of death between midnight and 1 a.m. "Did the killer leave any traces?" "There are clear fingerprints on the neck. If you find a suspect, we can compare them." "Any signs of rape?" This was not a sex crime. Sarah returned to Jacob with a warrant to take fingerprints. The young man looked devastated, but agreed to all the procedures without objection. "I want the killer found," he said as the technician took his fingerprints. "Rose was everything to me." "Mr. Miller, did Rose have other men in her life?" Sarah asked bluntly. "What? No, of course not. We had been dating for almost a year and were planning to get married." "Planning?" "I bought a ring. I was going to propose at Christmas." But something about his answer bothered Sarah. It was too categorical, too quick. People in grief usually doubt everything, go over the details, look for explanations. Jacob was too sure of his dead girlfriend's fidelity. That evening, the investigation team gathered at the department to analyze the evidence they had collected. A board with photos of the crime scene and a timeline of events covered the entire wall. "What do we have?" Sarah asked. "The victim is Rose Carter, 24 years old, worked as a cashier, studied to be a designer," Mills reported. She had been dating Jacob Miller for 11 months. He was the last person to see her alive. Motive? Possibly refusal to marry. Colleagues at work say she had been nervous the last few weeks. Maybe she was planning to break up with him. Officer Jenkins added, "Miller can't confirm an alibi after 10 p.m. He lives alone, and his neighbors don't remember anything specific." "Any evidence?" "The tire tracks near the forest park match his car. His clothes were recently washed. And he bought an engagement ring 3 days ago. Perhaps he felt he was losing his girlfriend." Sarah studied the crime scene photos. Something about the picture didn't quite add up, but she couldn't figure out what it was yet. "We'll question him officially tomorrow," she decided, "and check his phone records for the last week." At 10 o'clock in the evening, Sarah was still sitting in her office studying the case. A fragment of a photograph from Rose's trash can lay in front of her under the lamp. A man's face, definitely not Jacob's. Who was this man? She called the technicians. "Can you restore more of this photo?" "We'll try, but I can't promise anything. The paper is badly damaged." Rose's phone records painted an interesting picture. Most of the calls and messages were to Jacob, Megan, colleagues, and teachers. But in the last 2 weeks, calls from an unregistered number had appeared on the list. They were short, mostly late at night. "A payphone or a left SIM card," Mills said. Someone didn't want to be traced, or the victim didn't want anyone to know about these calls. A conversation with Rose's classmates provided another clue. "She's been kind of distant the last few weeks," said classmate Emma Davis. "She didn't participate in group projects and skipped classes. She used to be one of the best students." "Did she talk about any problems?" "No, but it was clear that something was bothering her. When we asked, she said everything was fine." Gradually, a picture emerged of a woman under pressure, hiding serious problems from her loved ones. A classic situation for domestic violence or coercion. At night, before going to bed, Sarah reviewed all the case materials once again. Jacob Miller seemed to be the obvious suspect: motive, opportunity, some evidence. But experience told her that in murders motivated by jealousy, there are always warning signs that those around the couple notice. None of the couple's acquaintances mentioned any conflicts, aggression, or controlling behavior on Jacob's part. On the contrary, everyone described him as an exemplary guy who adored Rose. Megan O'Connor learned of her friend's death from the morning news. Sitting in the salon before the start of her workday, she watched the news summary and saw a familiar face on the screen. "Rose Carter, 24 years old, found dead," the reporter's voice said, but the words floated by like a fog. Megan arrived at the police station in a state of shock. Detective Thompson met her in the interrogation room, a small room with white walls and fluorescent lighting. "Miss O'Connor, we know you were a close friend of Rose's. Tell us about her last few weeks." "She was strange, nervous, always looking over her shoulder, not sleeping well." Megan spoke mechanically, still not believing what was happening. "What about her relationship with Jacob Miller?" "Jacob? He loved her. He was planning to propose." "Were there any conflicts between them?" "No, but..." Megan paused, struggling with an internal conflict. Rose was dead, but did that give her the right to reveal her secrets? "Miss O'Connor, any information could help us find the killer." "She had another man," Megan said finally. "She had been seeing someone behind Jacob's back for 3 months." Sarah sat up straight. "Name?" "Ryan. I don't know his last name. We met at a bar. He works in construction." "Did Rose talk about him?" "A little. She said he was different, not like Jacob, more dangerous." "Dangerous in what way?" "Unpredictable. Ryan would disappear for days, then show up suddenly. He had his quirks." Sarah took notes, sensing that the case was taking a new turn. "When was the last time Rose mentioned him?" "Last week, she said she had broken up with him. She decided to focus on Jacob." "How did Ryan react?" "Badly. Rose looked scared after talking to him. I suggested she go to the police, but she refused." The new information completely changed the picture of the investigation. Sarah immediately contacted Mills. "We have a new suspect. A man named Ryan, works in construction, secretly met with the victim." A search of the databases yielded results within an hour. Ryan Blackwell, 28 years old, registered at an address in southeast Portland, works for the construction company Pacitric Building. No criminal record in Oregon, but a check in other states showed an arrest for domestic violence in Colorado 2 years ago. The charges were dropped after the victim refused to testify. "A pattern of behavior," Sarah Mills said on the phone. "Aggression toward women, moving to another state after problems with the law." They went to Ryan's address, but found an empty apartment. Neighbors said they hadn't seen him in 3 days. The building manager confirmed that the rent had been paid until the end of the month, but Ryan was not answering his phone. "He ran away," Mills suggested. At the Pacitric Building construction site, foreman Tommy Vasquez spoke about Ryan without much sympathy. "A good worker, but a little strange. He would disappear for a day or two without warning, then come back with some excuse." "When was he last seen?" "Last Friday. He said he was taking a week off. Family problems, he said." Does he have family in the city? No idea. Ryan wasn't very talkative. He worked separately from the crew and didn't socialize with anyone. Technical analysis of Rose's phone yielded new information. Recovered messages showed correspondence with a number registered to a fictitious name. The last message was received at 11:30 p.m. on October 15th. Meet me tomorrow at Forest Park. Midnight. Come alone. He lured her there, Mills said. Classic pattern. Sarah studied the recovered messages. The dynamics of the correspondence showed an escalation from romantic confessions to threats. In the last messages, Ryan wrote that Rose belonged to him, that she had no right to break up with him. A statewide search was launched. A description of Ryan's vehicle, a blue Ford F-150 pickup truck, was circulated to all patrols. The breakthrough came on the third day of the search. Security cameras at a gas station 50 miles from Portland recorded Ryan's pickup truck on the evening of October 15th at 9:40 p.m. He was filling up and buying cigarettes, looking calm. He was preparing for the meeting, Sarah said, studying the recording. He knew what he was doing. The next clue was found at the roadside inn motel near Interstate 84. The manager recognized Ryan from a photo. He rented a room for 3 days, paid cash. He checked out yesterday morning. In the room, investigators found hair matching the victim's and a piece of fabric from her jacket. There were skin particles under Ryan's fingernails. DNA analysis will confirm that they match samples from Rose's body. The arrest happened unexpectedly simply. Ryan returned to Portland and showed up at the Cider House bar, the very place where he met Rose. The bartender recognized him and called the police after seeing the news report. He was sitting in the corner, drinking whiskey and staring at the empty chair across from him, the bartender said. When I realized who it was, my hands started shaking. Sarah and the arrest team arrived at the bar 15 minutes later. Ryan did not resist arrest. He sat quietly, as if he had been waiting for them to arrive. Ryan Blackwell, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Rose Carter, Sarah said as she handcuffed him. She came to the meeting herself, he said quietly. No one forced her. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. Ryan confessed to the murder but insisted it was an accident in a fit of rage. She said I meant nothing to her, he said in a monotone voice. That she was choosing him, that faceless nobody. I couldn't accept that. And what happened next? I just wanted to talk, to explain to her that she was making a mistake, but she wouldn't listen. She tried to leave. And you stopped her. I grabbed her arm. She started screaming, trying to break free. She was afraid of me, as if I were a monster. The psychological profile compiled by experts showed a man with narcissistic traits and an inability to accept rejection. Ryan's previous relationship in Colorado had ended similarly, with stalking and threats. He saw women as his property, explained psychologist Dr. Henderson. When Rose tried to assert her independence, it triggered uncontrollable rage in him. Jacob Miller was cleared of suspicion and apologized for the misunderstanding. I didn't even know this man existed, he told Sarah. Rose never mentioned any problems. Victims of domestic violence often hide threats, explained the detective. They're afraid that no one will believe them or that the situation will get worse. The trial lasted 2 months. Ryan Blackwell was sentenced to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder. At the sentencing, he sat impassively, as if what was happening did not concern him. Megan O'Connor gave an interview to a local TV station. Rose was a good person who found herself in a terrible situation. She tried to make the right choice, but it was too late. Jacob moved out of Portland a month after the trial. His co-workers said he couldn't stay in a city where every street reminded him of Rose. Detective Sarah Thompson closed the case with her usual professionalism, but this case remained in her memory for a long time. Some crimes can be prevented, she told reporters. If the victim had sought help earlier, perhaps the tragedy could have been avoided. The case file contained photographs of a happy young woman who dreamed of a career as a designer and a better life in the big city. Rose Carter became another statistic in the sad list of victims of domestic violence, women who paid with their lives for trying to escape toxic relationships.